Nigeria has postponed its planned raising of about $950 million overseas bonds owing to unfavorable market conditions during the time frame approved for the fundraising. Finance Minister Zainab Ahmed said in April that the government intends to sell the bonds as early as May as its second external debt this year to help plug fiscal deficits. The planned $950 million bond sale would account for the balance of $6.1 billion overseas borrowings plan for 2021 after it raised the second tranche of $1.25 billion in March. Meanwhile, according to the information on the Central Bank of Nigeria's website, Nigeria's foreign reserves stood at $38.483 billion as of May 31, 2022, down by 5% from the $40.521 billion reported at the end of December 2021. But then South Africa, Africa's second largest economy after Nigeria, increased its foreign reserves to $60.28 billion by the end of April 2022. And that is according to the most recent data available, up from $57.589 billion at the end of December 2021. So foreign reserves are assets, in case you don't know, held in foreign currencies by central banks. And during emergencies or times of stress, these reserves are used to bolster the economy and increase the foreign exchange market. So today, we are talking about Nigeria's suspension of issuing Eurobond as its foreign reserves dipped. This is Business Edge. I am Lekan Onabanjo, standing in for Tolu Lokpe at the Balogun. You're welcome. And joining me from West Africa's commercial capital, Lagos, Nigeria, is Gospel Obele, Chief Economist, Streetnomics. Good morning to you, Gospel. Thanks for joining us on Business Edge.
Good morning, Lekan. Thank you again for having me.
All right, you're welcome. So according to what we heard, Nigeria actually shelved plans to raise about $950 million selling overseas bonds owing to unfavorable market conditions. And of course, at that particular time, they were hoping to raise that amount, but due to unfavorable conditions, they couldn't continue with the plan. So I'm asking, what were those unfavorable conditions that hinged the plan by the federal government to raise the Eurobonds?
Thank you again. Great speaking with you, Lekan. The current state of the economy, to start with, our the first point of call in terms of the unfavorable conditions, as it were. You also have the conversation around the changing global narratives, and the fear of a looming recession as well, in terms of how global food and energy prices are hiking, inflation is hiking globally, and there's an increase in interest rates generally across board, which would make, in sense, that the cost of borrowing will be high, the cost of servicing those debts as well will be high as we move on subsequently, post the success of accessing these bonds and all that. So these are the economics around why the government would probably want to have a rethink, in terms of sustainability. Also, knowing the fact that it's a pre-election year in Nigeria, economic priorities and delivering on economic outcomes are at the mercy of political correctness, as it were. So it's a very, very complex conversation. And just recently, the IMF warned that over 70% of our revenue is being used to service debt. So it maybe doesn't make sense, to get into that space where you now have to deal with these technicalities again and maybe fall short in the sense of foreign exchange and government expenditure.
So in terms of servicing debts, now in the interim, are there other ways or other mechanics that you think the government can bring into play in order to plug fiscal deficits?
So the way fiscal deficits work is that you either have a very solid revenue structure or very solid revenue streams that helps to fund the budget, or you go through debt financing, a lot of times, and some other development financing techniques. But debt financing are the major, most popular and relatively easiest, to access. A lot of times also, you also want to talk about the fact that these dynamics also reveal, the strength or the loopholes you have as an economy. Meaning that, for instance, in the Nigerian context, we are not making enough revenue. And it will even surprise you to know that the totality of our budget size, as it were, at the moment, is not even up to 1/3 of the value of Apple brand in the United States. So that's to tell you that within the context of things, we are still playing largely small. And Nigeria is not the only country in the world that has a high budget, debt rather. But the trick is that what have we been using the monies for? All right, we've been wrongly investing in the wrong sectors that have low returns or no returns. So those are the cause for worry and the conversation around the debt is not bad as a means to finance a fiscal deficit, but how you use the debt is where the question is.
All right, well, definitely this conversation cannot be exhausted, but then we need to consider how soon do you think Nigeria will be able to raise another proposed bond, if they would definitely do it again? Do you think this year is feasible, or you think probably next year?
So I would think of I think it's a combination of watching the macroeconomic headwinds, especially within the Nigerian context, and how the global economy is shaping, context, and how we can meet up with debt financing, debt servicing, and the like. So I think it's still a developing story until a lot of other factors are in place technically, and there's some form of stability around things. We may not be able to tell exactly when. But then again, these are monies that Nigeria really needs, to deploy into core capital projects and all that. So I would say very soon, but it's still a developing story. So the concern is to keep an eye on how the narratives evolve, knowing fully well that it's an intensely political period for the country, and the economics would be at the mercy of the politics.
All right, so according to what we heard, the nation is planning to curb external borrowing costs this year by using IMF's special drawing rights to actually fund the project. So tell us, how viably feasible do you think this will be, judging by past actions?
Yeah, so in the short term, it would make sense, just to find another option, and the SDR seems like a good option in the short term. But my own take is very simple. All of these different options do not still solve the critical cultural problem, which is taking monies, no one can account for them. The channels or pipelines through which those monies are being spent are full of leakages and some form of lack of capacity to drive the real lack of interest and capacity to drive the real developmental agenda. So it's not much about where you get the money from, or how you are planning to manage for risk and all of that. It is much more around where you're investing these monies. All right. So whether you do the SDR or do the Eurobond or whichever platform you want to engage, it's more around where are you heavily invested? What are the potential of the returns on investments, as it were? And would you be in a position where you do not have to come back to the same situation subsequently? All right, these are the conversations that makes Nigeria look as though we're a very vulnerable economy. Actually, we are, in need of foreign aid or some other ODAs and all that. So it's not much around where, it's much around how we deploy these monies, the pipelines, the channels, the projects, and the layers of priorities through which these monies are disseminated.
Well, of course, Gospel, this story keeps going on. We keep proffering these solutions, but we discover that the powers that be or the handlers are not really doing what is necessary in terms of ensuring that our areas of investment get the right attention. So if you are going to give a direction or proffer a solution or probably create that sort of environment or institution, what would you do, or what measures would you put in place to ensure that we plug the right money in the right areas? Because if we need to generate funds and, of course, be able to pay up our debts, we need to be able to plug the money in the right areas. So what would you do to ensure that due diligence is actually achieved in this area?
I would want to look at the low-hanging fruits and the quick wins. And for me, would be organizing the non-oil sector for exports. Now, a lot of people say that, okay, when you export, you sort of increase your chances to expand, not just your revenue stream, also your reserve pool and all that. But the conversation is not really if you're exporting. It is, number one, what you're exporting, two, where you're exporting to, and three, the value of the exports. Right now in Nigeria, even if we're to, the way that we are right now as a nation, if we're to scale everything we're doing right now, we will not still meet any of those three. The reason is because we're already exporting so much crude oil, all right? We're already doing a lot in agriculture, but 90% of our activities in agriculture are still crop farming based, all right? Our industrials and all of that are not yet positioned in such a way that it unlocks value from the agricultural sector. And then you don't have access to market and finance solutions to position those value creation, for international markets. Meaning that if you produce cocoa here in Nigeria and you process cocoa to chocolates in Nigeria, those chocolates should be able to compete favorably with chocolates in the UK, with chocolates in Switzerland, all right? Those chocolates produced in Nigeria can be sold in the Tesco, Sainsbury's, and Aldi's of the UK and other places in Germany and other places. And they need to become like the go-to chocolates, for people in that region as well. So it's a lot of getting the access to market game right. And those are the quick wins, because you don't need to literally spend so much. It's just more around agreements, what you're bringing to the table, and the infrastructure to ensure that these products get to the final destination safe, they're well protected, quality control, and and all of that. So until we are being able to effectively diversify the revenue base, or productively diversify the revenue base, all right, Nigeria may not be able to earn enough revenue, all right, not just to service its debt, but also to finance its capital expenditure in terms of creating more streams, or revenue streams to be able to finance your capital expenditure, as well as expanding on the FX or foreign exchange or foreign reserves pool. Now, until that is effectively done, we cannot move to the second layer of sufficiency, which is now you thinking of how you can begin to pipe deeply into capital projects that can power up the economy on the landslide. The government needs to make a lot of money in the short to mid term. And the only way to go about it is to organize your markets or just be competitive from a value processing standpoint and from an access to market standpoint.
So if I could deduce from what you're saying, Gospel, does that mean that given the possibility of unforeseen shocks and probably global market volatility, of course, that we are seeing now, can we say that Nigeria's economy does not have what it takes to insulate itself from possible recession?
Of course it doesn't. I mean, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but it actually doesn't, If there's currently a fear of a looming global recession now because of the way food prices are going up, the Russia-Ukraine war is not stabilizing, all right? There are severe climate change challenges in key markets. Talk about soya bean from Vietnam, you talk about grains from Ukraine, talk about sunflower from Russia. Key markets are disrupted either on the platform of COVID-19. China is currently on mini lockdown, and sort of trying to take care of its own people first due to recent COVID-19 outbreak. So you're thinking of war, COVID-19 outbreak, and climate change. The effect of these three is disrupting supply chain at a different level, all right? And because we are strongly an import-dependent economy, and we don't even have enough value-oriented, to keep, grow, and sustain our own economy, it means that we are constantly vulnerable to every global and international shocks, all right? Or we don't even have the pipeline through which we can manage, or how I put it, relax the pressure of these shocks on the average Nigerian and on the average economy, all right? So some countries are on the wing for it. Some countries are better positioned to absorb the shock, while other countries are just vulnerable. And unfortunately, Nigeria happens to be at the later. So it's definitely going to be expected. If recession hits the global economy, Nigeria will be hit badly. And it's going to be quite unfortunate because it's also a pre-election year. So there's going to be a lot of chaos and uncertainty and confusion and fear in the air. I hope we don't get to that point, but we need to take quick actions. Yeah.
Well, of course, South Africa is taking quick actions, and its economy is said to be growing because the foreign reserves have also grown. But then, Gospel, just stay with us for a while. We'll go for a break, and we get to use South Africa as a benchmark to understand what Nigeria needs to do going forward. Now, the planned $950 million bond sale would have accounted for the balance of $6.1 billion in overseas borrowings. But then the Nigerian finance minister, that is Zainab Ahmed, said that that wasn't possible because the market pricing was not favorable, and that at that time, the approval period had closed before the process could be initiated. But then financial experts are wondering why the country's foreign reserves dwindles at such a rate, pegged at $38.483 billion compared to South Africa's, which is about $60.28 billion. So we get to compare between Nigeria and South Africa after the other side of this break. So do stay with us. The conversation will continue. On Business Edge, we've been engaging Gospel Obele, Chief Economist, Streetnomics, on Nigeria's halting on issuing Eurobond as foreign reserves dip. So let me just go back to Gospel. Definitely, we understand that using foreign reserves is a way of measuring how a country is improving economically, financially, as it is. And of course, that helps analysts and of course politicians to determine how a country is performing on the global stage in terms of its economy. So tell us, why is it that foreign reserves are seen as something that is important and a significant talking point for so many?
Yes, they are very important because it's the only formally recognized, highest level of asset pool, where foreign exchange are held as a medium or as a means to enabling economic stability or also helping to cushion impact, of shocks and all that when the need arises. So it's very critical. Just like the way you have savings, the average Nigerian has savings somewhere for the rainy day. The foreign exchange reserves happen to be like the official savings account in foreign exchange, in foreign currencies held by the Apex Bank for the economy, for the local economy. So it's very critical, yeah.
Okay, so according to CBN, the data brought forward, now we understand that Nigeria's foreign reserves has been on a steady decline for quite a while now. I talk about $38.843 billion from $40.251 billion. That's in about just 5% between December 2021 till now. So why is it that Nigeria is losing? Why is the foreign reserves depleting? What actually is the issue, and how do you think we can correct it? Of course, you've mentioned so many things, but then we need to be critical about this.
Yeah, it's an issue. It's always been an issue. I mean, when you don't do what is right at the right time, when you don't strike the iron when it's hot, right, you would keep making the same mistakes, and many times those mistakes can really, really, really become grievous or become very expensive to handle. All right. Since independence, we had every reason. I don't want to quote too much figures, so we don't go too technical. But we had almost at the same foreign reserves with China and most of the developed economies right now in the early independence period to the oil boom and all of that. Right? But due to economic mismanagement, fiscal indiscipline, and lack of a visionary leadership that was rigorous enough in its approach to economic management. Due to all of that, we've seen the situation where the reserves, the foreign exchange or the foreign reserves are, hinged, or they're a function of the profits we make from crude oil sales only. All right, so when you sell exports or you make export proceeds and all that, what you have after taking off every other thing else is what goes into the reserve. That was why in 2014, the ex-minister, Dr. Obele was saying then when oil price was still high, that, okay, now that we've had a lot of money beyond our budgetary pegs and all of that, let's save the rest into our foreign exchange reserves. All right, but people didn't listen as well. But that's one conversation because we've always hinged the foreign reserves growth and development of that pool on crude oil only. Now, the level at which your economy is structured, productive and competitive will reflect in your reserves. It's just normal. And those reserves can also affect the value of your currency and all of that. So recently, hitherto, we've pegged the reserves functioning to, crude oil sales only. Now, until we begin to expand the productive revenue structure. The Nigerian economy is already diversified, by the way. It's already diversified. But to begin to diversify the productive revenue structure of the economy, we will not be able to do enough to earn foreign exchange receipts. Now, it is when you earn foreign exchange receipts, the excess, when you do your expenses and your turnover and all of that, the excess is what goes into your reserves. So your excess is a function of your productivity pool in the first place, in terms of how much you're making from selling abroad. And it cannot just be crude oil, because more crude oil is not even processed. But then we need to move beyond that to processed crude oil, plus, to a large extent, the non-oil space, processed value-added items that can compete in international markets for us to also earn foreign exchange. Until we can do that extensively, we will keep coming back to this conversation, and it will keep happening.
So South Africa has the second largest economy in Africa compared to Nigeria, which is the first. But then, of course, it's been grappling with a soaring unemployment rate. However, it's been able to raise its reserves to about $60.28 billion compared to Nigeria, which is about $38.8 billion. So how do we actually reconcile these two extremes?
So we need to understand that the structuring of the Nigerian economy and the South African economy is different. No nations are different, that's to say. But one place where I think South Africa has done a lot of positive things that we haven't is in the fiscal policy. When people talk about reserves, people think it's a conversation of the central or the apex bank only. No. You also have a fiscal policy side to enabling reserves. So for instance, if you do not have the right infrastructure, the right government policies, the right agencies on deck to support non-oil sector players, if you don't have the right policy framework to unlock access to market solutions, to have the necessary bilateral and multilateral trade agreements with other strategic nations, you would not be able to find yourself in a position where those policies added to the apex bank policies can now begin to push a significant mass of SMEs or non-oil sector stakeholders towards doing business across borders. So that's the conversation here. There has to be an engineering team. In this case, it would have been PEBED, but that conversation is not conversation, right? There has to be an engineering team that takes the critical mass of non-oil sector players. I mean, Nigeria has one of the highest rates of entrepreneurship in terms of growth, startups, and all that in the world. That's a clear potential that can be harnessed, in terms of exporting value and all of that to other countries. On the flip side, we also have a vastly increasing service sector, which takes almost 50% of our GDP in terms of economic activity. But economic activity is not productivity, all right? Until we harness the value of the services sector and plug them directly to the mainstream internationally, we'll be able to access foreign exchange. So I think the South African government has done more around foreign policy, enabling and strengthening for reserves than we have done.
All right. So at this point, I must say thank you so much. I'm Gospel Obele for joining the conversation.
Thank you for having me, Lekan. Great speaking with you.
Great speaking with you too. Thank you very much. Now, Africa's biggest crude producer, that is Nigeria, was one of the first sovereigns to tap the Eurobond market after Russia's war in Ukraine in February. Now, that is a new issue. Of course, on this old, maybe it's time to start dealing with inhibitors and seek other means to increase the vault to make it more formidable against unprecedented future shocks. That is something Nigeria needs to do. So let's quickly run off on this break, and when it's time, we'll bring you NC4 to watch. So on NC4 to watch, let's take you through the 4 trending stories in the business world. The Stanbic Bank Purchasing Managers Index shows that business confidence in Kenya is still declining 2 months before the August 8 general elections. The decline has been exacerbated by supply chain uncertainty, inflation, and geopolitical concerns resulting from the Ukraine-Russia war, according to polls. Now, Ethiopia's central bank has warned its citizens not to engage in any transactions involving digital currencies, adding that such are now illegal in Ethiopia. The bank urges the public to be aware of such illegal activities as the use of digital currencies such as cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and other currencies of the country are not recognized by the National Bank of Ethiopia. Away from that, platinum surplus is fragile amid supply risks and growing demand, according to the World Platinum Investment Council. Supply is fairly constrained and supplies from mines are limited, and that is according to the Chief Executive Officer, WPIC, Paul Wilson, at a Precious and Previous Metals Conference in Singapore on Tuesday. And finally, with predictions of a global economic slowdown, gold could be on the verge of another rise, with a new push towards the $2,000 per ounce price tag. And that is it on Business Edge for today. Do not forget that you can visit our social media platforms at News Central TV. You can also go to our website, www.newscentral.africa, and download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store. My name is Lekan Onabanjo. See you some other time. Have a beautiful day.